The empire has fallen. The Holy Cross has been stolen. Enemies stand at the gates of the capital. And in this darkest hour, one emperor, armed with nothing but faith and a sword, sets out to rewrite history. This is the final battle. This is the story of Heraclius' return. What's up, Histox crew? We're here with a fresh piece of history that's bound to blow your mind. Let's jump in. In October of 610 CE, a fleet set sail from Carthage toward Constantinople. At its helm was Heraclius, son of the Exarch of Africa. And he wasn't coming as a diplomat. He was coming to take the throne. The Eastern Roman Empire was in chaos. The current emperor, Phocas, had seized power in a bloody coup, executed the previous emperor Maurice and his sons, and ruled with brutality and paranoia. Under his reign, the empire crumbled. Persian forces under King Khosrow II, claiming to avenge Maurice, had invaded and were tearing through Roman territory. Starvation, war, and fear gripped the people. When Heraclius arrived at the capital, he didn't need to fight his way in. The city was so exhausted and disillusioned that Phocas's own guards turned on him. They dragged him before Heraclius, who asked bitterly, "Is this how you have ruled the empire?" Phocas spat back, "And will you rule it any better?" Moments later, he was executed. Heraclius was crowned emperor, but there was little time for celebration. The empire was falling apart. Heraclius reached out to Khosrow to end the war. After all, Phocas, the man whose crimes started it, was gone. But the Persian king wasn't interested in peace anymore. He had taken half the empire and had no reason to stop. Heraclius knew he had to act. For the first time in centuries, a Roman emperor would personally take the field. In 613, he marched to Antioch to stop the Persians. But it was a disaster. The Persians crushed the Romans, Antioch was looted, and Heraclius barely escaped with his life. From there, things got worse. The Persians captured Damascus, then Jerusalem. They looted churches, enslaved civilians, and took the true cross, the most sacred relic in Christianity, as a trophy. In Constantinople, morale collapsed. The Slavs raided the Balkans, the Avars threatened from the north, and the empire seemed on the brink of collapse. At his lowest point, Heraclius considered fleeing, moving the capital to Carthage and abandoning the east. But the Patriarch of Constantinople intervened. In the Hagia Sophia, he made Heraclius swear never to abandon the city. He pledged the church's gold to fund a counterattack and told Heraclius that God had not forsaken them. Inspired, Heraclius changed strategy. He stopped trying to defend and instead prepared to strike. He melted down gold and silver to fund his war machine. Every citizen helped. They weren't fighting for territory anymore. They were fighting for survival. In 622 CE, Heraclius led a new, lean army eastward. His men were fewer but better trained and fiercely loyal. He studied Maurice's Strategicon, drilled his troops, and marched into Anatolia. There, he defeated Persian forces in a surprise victory and kept going. In the following years, Heraclius pulled off an improbable comeback. He launched daring attacks, including a night raid that nearly captured the Persian general Sharbaraz. He crossed rivers under fire and crushed Persian detachments one after another. His soldiers fought like men possessed. But the war wasn't just on the front lines. In 626, Constantinople itself came under siege. The Avars and Slavs attacked from the north, while Sharbaraz approached from the east. Heraclius was far away, deep in Persian territory. But the capital held firm. The Romans believed they were protected by divine intervention, and when the siege finally broke, they paraded the icon of the Virgin Mary through the streets in thanks. Heraclius seized a golden opportunity. He intercepted a Persian letter ordering the execution of Sharbaraz. Khosrow was blaming him for recent losses. Heraclius forged more names onto the list and delivered the message. Outraged, Sharbaraz turned on his king and withdrew his army. With one of Persia's top generals out of the war, Heraclius made his final move. In December 627, near Nineveh, he drew the Persians into a trap. In brutal, hand-to-hand combat, the Romans won a decisive victory. Heraclius personally fought and killed the Persian commander. The Persian army shattered. Khosrow refused peace, but his court had lost faith. His own son, Kavad II, staged a coup and had him executed. The new king quickly sued for peace. He returned all the land Persia had conquered, Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia, and even returned the true cross. Heraclius had done the impossible. In less than a decade, he had saved the Eastern Roman Empire from total destruction. He was hailed as a hero, a new Constantine. He carried the true cross back to Jerusalem in triumph. The empire rejoiced, and had he died then, that's how history would remember him. But fate had other plans. The war had shattered both empires, and in the power vacuum that followed, a new force emerged from the Arabian Peninsula. A prophet named Muhammad was preaching a new faith, and within a generation, the armies of Islam would sweep through both Rome and Persia, changing the world forever. But that is a story for another time. As the dust settled from the Roman-Persian wars, both empires were exhausted, politically broken, economically drained, and militarily spent. Cities lay in ruins. Borders had shifted, only to snap back again. And while Heraclius returned home victorious, his empire was a shadow of its former strength. Meanwhile, far to the south, something remarkable was unfolding in the Arabian Peninsula. In the city of Mecca, a man named Muhammad had begun preaching a radical message, that there was one God and that he, Muhammad, was his final messenger. At first, he was ignored, then mocked, then violently opposed, but he endured. And slowly, he began to gather followers. Exiled to Medina, he built a new kind of community, a political, military, and spiritual force bound not by tribe, but by faith. By the time Heraclius was parading the true cross through Jerusalem, Muhammad had united much of Arabia under Islam. His successors, the caliphs, took that unification and turned it into momentum. Within just a few years, they launched a series of campaigns that would shake the foundations of the ancient world. In 636, at the Battle of Yarmouk, the Eastern Roman army, fresh from decades of war, met the Muslims in battle. The Romans had the numbers, the armor, the experience, but they were tired, fractured, and underestimated their new foe. What happened next wasn't just a defeat, it was a disaster. The Roman army was annihilated. Syria fell. Then Palestine. Then Egypt. Heraclius, now old and weary, watched as his hard-won victories were unraveled in the blink of an eye. "Farewell, Syria," he is said to have whispered. "What a fine country you are to lose." And it wasn't just Rome. The once mighty Persian Empire was swept away entirely. In less than 2 decades, the armies of Islam had shattered both superpowers. It was one of the most dramatic shifts in history. In a single generation, the ancient world died, and a new one was born. But the legacy of Heraclius wasn't gone. His reforms, military, administrative, and religious, would shape the Byzantine Empire for centuries to come. And his struggle, his refusal to surrender when all seemed lost, remained a legend. Sometimes, history turns not on grand victories, but on survival. Heraclius didn't save the empire forever, but he saved it long enough for it to adapt, evolve, and endure. And that, in the end, may have been enough. By 636 CE, just a few years after Heraclius' epic victory over the Persians, a new army appears. This time, not from the east, but from the deserts of Arabia. Led by generals like Khalid ibn al-Walid, the Muslims aren't like the Persians or the Goths. They're fast, unified, and deeply motivated by their faith. And unlike the previous threats Heraclius had faced, this one wasn't just a war for land, it was a movement. The Roman army meets the Muslim forces at the Battle of Yarmouk. Heraclius, now an old and weary man, isn't there to lead them. His health is failing, and so is the empire's strength. The battle is a total disaster. The Byzantine army is crushed, and Syria, land that had only just been reclaimed from the Persians, is lost for good. Watching all this from afar, Heraclius is devastated. After everything he had done to bring the empire back from the brink, it's all slipping away again. Egypt falls next. Jerusalem is taken. The empire is shrinking rapidly, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. The man who had once been hailed as the savior of Rome now spends his final days in Constantinople, isolated and heartbroken. When he dies in 641, he leaves behind a shattered empire. His name, once shouted in the streets with praise, is now remembered with a mix of awe and tragedy. Heraclius didn't just fight battles. He fought fate itself. And for a moment, he won. But history, as always, had the final word. He brought the cross home. But he had no idea what would follow. A prophet, a new empire, and a tide that would drown everything Rome had left. Had Heraclius defeated one evil, only to unleash another? Smash that like button and subscribe for more epic tales.